The Little Red Purse. Among the presents which Lou found on her 10th birthday was a pretty red plush purse with a steel clasp and chain, just like Mama's, only much smaller. In it were 10 bright new cents, that being the sum Lou received each week to spend as she liked. She enjoyed all her gifts very much. But this one seemed to please her even more than the French doll in blue silk, the pearl ring, or Alice in Wonderland, 3 things which she had wanted for a long time. It is so cunning, and the snap makes such a loud noise, and the chain is so nice on my arm, and the plush so red and soft, I can't help loving my dear little purse. I shall spend all the money for candy, and eat it every bit myself, because it is my birthday, and I must celebrate it, said Lou, as she hovered like a bee round a honey pot about the table where the gifts were spread. Now she was in a great hurry to go out shopping, with the new purse proudly carried in her small fat hand. Auntie was soon ready, and away they went across the pleasant park, where the pretty babies were enjoying the last warm days of autumn as they played among the fallen leaves. You will be ill if you eat 10 cents worth of candy today, said Auntie. I'll sprinkle it along through the day, and eat each kind separate, then they won't disturb me, I am sure, answered Lou, who still used funny words, and always got interrupt and disturb rather mixed. Just then a poor man who had lost his legs came creeping along with a tray of little flower pots to sell. Only 5 cents, miss. Help an unfortunate man, please, Mum. Let me buy one for my baby house. It would be sweet. Cora Pinky May would love to have that darling little rose in her best parlor, cried Lou, thinking of the fine new doll. Auntie much preferred to help the poor man than to buy candy, so the flower pot was soon bought, though the red rose was unlike any ever seen in a garden. Now I'll have 5 cents for my treat, and no danger of being ill, said Lou, as they went on again. But in a few moments a new beggar appeared, and Lou's tender heart would not let her pass the old woman without dropping 2 of her bright cents in the tin cup. Do come to the candy place at once, or I never shall get any, begged Lou, as the red purse grew lighter and lighter every minute. 3 sticks of candy were all she could buy, but she felt that she could celebrate the birthday on that, and was ready to go home and begin at once. As they went on to get some flowers to dress the cake at tea time, Lou suddenly stopped short, lifted both hands, and cried out in a tone of despair. My purse! My purse! I've lost it. Oh, I've lost it. Left it in the store probably. Come and look for it, said Auntie, and back they turned, just in time to meet a shabby little girl running after them with the precious thing in her hand. Ain't this yours? I thought you dropped it, and would hate to lose it, she said, smiling pleasantly. Oh, I should. It's spandy new, and I love it dearly. I've got no more money to pay you, only this candy, do take a stick, and Lou presented the red barley sugar. The little girl took it gladly, and ran off. Well, 2 sticks will do. I'd rather lose every bit of it than my darling purse, said Lou, putting it carefully in her pocket. I love to give things away and make people happy, began Lou, but stopped to watch a dog who came up to her, wagging his tail as if he knew what a kind little girl she was, and wanted to be made happy. She put out her hand to pat him, quite forgetting the small parcel in it, but the dog snapped it up before she could save it. Oh, my last stick. I didn't mean to give it to him. You naughty dog, drop it this minute, cried poor Lou. But the beautiful pink cream candy was forever lost, and the ungrateful thief ran off, after a vain attempt to eat the flower pot also. It was so funny that Auntie laughed, and Lou joined her, after shaking her finger at the dog, who barked and frisked as if he felt that he had done a clever thing. Now I am quite satisfied, and you will have a pleasanter birthday for having made 4 people and a dog happy, instead of yourself sick with too many goodies. Charity is a nice sort of sweetie. And I hope you will buy that kind with your pocket money now and then, my dear, said Auntie, as they walked on again. Could I do much with 10 cents a week? Asked Lou. Yes, indeed. You could buy a little book for lame Sammy, who loves to read, or a few flowers for my sick girl at the hospital, or a loaf of bread for some hungry person, or milk for a poor baby, or you could save up your money till Christmas. And get presents for children who otherwise would have none. Could I do all those things? I'd like to get presents best, and I will, cried Lou, charmed with the idea of playing Santa Claus. I didn't think 10 cents would be so useful. How long to Christmas, Auntie? About 10 weeks. If you save all your pocket money till then, you will have $1 to spend. A truly dollar. How fine. But all that time I shouldn't have any candy. I don't think I could get along without some. Perhaps if I was very good someone would give me a bit now and then, and Lou looked up with her most engaging smile and a twinkle in her eye. We will see about that. Perhaps someone will give extra cents for work you may do, and leave you to decide which kind of sweeties you would buy. What can I do to earn money? Asked Lou. Well, you can dry and fold the paper every morning for Grandpa. I will pay you a cent for that, because Nurse is apt to forget it, and he likes to have it nicely ready for him after breakfast. Then you might run up and down for Mama, and hem some towels for me, and take care of Jip and the parrot. You will earn a good deal if you do your work regularly and well. I shall have dreadful trials going by the candy shops and never buying any. I do long so to go in that I have to look away when you say no. I want to be good and help poor people, but I'm afraid it will be too hard for me, sighed Lou, foreseeing the temptations before her. We might begin today, and try the new plan for a while. If it is too hard, you can give it up. But I think you will soon like my way best, and have the merriest Christmas you ever knew with the money you save. Lou walked thoughtfully home, and put the empty purse away, resolved to see how long she could hold out, and how much she could earn. Mama smiled when she heard the plan, but at once engaged the little girl to do errands about the house at a cent a job, privately quite sure that her pretty express would soon stop running. Grandpapa was pleased to find his paper ready, and nodded and patted Lou's curly head when she told him about her Christmas plans. Mary, the maid, was glad to get rid of combing Jip and feeding Polly, and Auntie made towel hemming pleasant by telling stories as the little needlewoman did 2 hems a day. Every cent went into the red purse, which Lou hung on one of the gilt pegs of the easel in the parlor, for she thought it very ornamental, and hoped contributions might drop in occasionally. None did. But as everyone paid her in bright cents, there was soon a fine display, and the little bag grew heavy with delightful rapidity. Only once did Lou yield to temptation, and that was when 2 weeks of self-denial made her trials so great that she felt as if she really must reward herself, as no one else seemed to remember how much little girls loved candy. One day she looked pale, and did not want any dinner, saying she felt sick. Mama was away, so Auntie put her on the bed and sat by her, feeling very anxious, as scarlet fever was about. By and by Lou took her handkerchief out, and there, sticking to it, was a large brown cough drop. Lou turned red, and hid her face, saying with a penitent sob, I don't deserve to be cuddled. I've been selfish and silly, and spent some of my money for candy. I had a little cold, and I thought cough drops would do me good. I ate a good many, and they were bitter and made me sick, and I'm glad of it. Auntie wanted to laugh at the dear little sinner and her funny idea of choosing bitter candy as a sort of self-denial, but she comforted her kindly, and soon the invalid was skipping about again, declaring that she never would do so any more. Next day something happened which helped her very much, and made it easier to like the new kind of sweeties better than the old. She was in the dining room getting an apple for her lunch, when she saw a little girl come to the lower door to ask for cold food. The cook was busy, and sent her away, telling her begging was forbidden. Lou, peeping out, saw the little girl sit down on the steps to eat a cold potato as if she was very hungry, and while she ate she was trying to tie on a pair of very old boots someone had given her. It was a rainy day, and she had only a shawl over her head, her hands were red with cold, her gown was a faded cotton one, and her big basket seemed to have very few scraps in it. So poor, so sad, and tired did she look, that Lou could not bear to see it, and she called out in her pitiful child's voice. Come in and get warm, little girl. Don't mind old Sarah. I'll give you something to eat, and lend you my rubber boots and waterproof to go home in." The poor child gladly went to sit by the comfortable fire, while Lou with hospitable haste got crackers and cheese and cake and apples, and her own silver mug of milk, for her guest, forgetting, in her zeal, to ask leave. Fortunately Auntie came down for her own lunch in time to see what was going on, and found Lou busily buttoning the waterproof, while the little girl surveyed her rubber boots and small umbrella with pride. "I'm only lending my things, and she will return them tomorrow, Auntie. They are too small for me, and the umbrella is broken, and I'd love to give them all to Lucy if I could. She has to go out in the rain to get food for her family, like a bird, and I don't." "Birds don't need waterproofs and umbrellas," began Auntie. And both children laughed at the idea of sparrows with such things, but looked a little anxious till Auntie went on to say that Lucy could have these comforts, and to fill the basket with something better than cold potatoes. While she asked questions and heard the sad little story, how father was dead, and the baby sick, so mother could not work, and the boys had to pick up chips and cinders to burn, and Lucy begged food to eat. Lou listened with tears in her blue eyes, and a great deal of pity as well as admiration for poor little Lucy, who was only 9, yet had so many cares and troubles in her life. While Auntie went to get some flannel for baby, Lou flew to her red purse and counted out 10 cents from her store, feeling so rich, so glad to have it instead of an empty bonbon box, and a headache after a candy feast. "Buy some nice fresh milk for little Toddy, and tell her I sent it all myself with my love. Come again tomorrow, and I will tell Mama all about you, and you shall be my poor people, and I'll help you if I can," she said, full of interest and goodwill, for the sight of this child made her feel what poverty really was, and longed to lighten it if she could. Lucy was smiling when she went away, snug and dry in her comfortable clothes, with the full basket on her arm, and all that day Lou talked and thought about her own poor people, and what she hoped to do for them. Mama inquired, and finding them worthy of help, let her little girl send many comforts to the children, and learn how to be wisely charitable. "I shall give all my money to my Lucy children on Christmas," announced Lou, as that pleasant time drew near. "I know what they want, and though I can't save money enough to give them half the things they need, maybe I can help a good deal, and really have a nice bundle to surprise them with." This idea took possession of little Lou, and she worked like a beaver in all sorts of funny ways to fill her purse by Christmas time. One thing she did which amused her family very much, though they were obliged to stop it. Lou danced very prettily, and often had what she called ballets before she went to bed, when she tripped about the parlor like a fairy in the gay costumes Auntie made for her. As the purse did not fill as fast as she hoped, Lou took it into her head one fine day to go round the square where she lived, with her tambourine, and dance as some of the girls with the hand organ men did. So she dressed herself in her red skirt and black velvet jacket, and with a fur cap on her head and a blue cloak over her shoulders, slipped out into the quiet square, and going to the farther corner, began to dance and beat her tambourine on the sidewalk before a house where some little children lived. As she expected, they soon came running to the window, and were charmed to see the pretty dancer whirling to and fro, with her ribbons flying and her tambourine bells ringing, till her breath was gone. Then she held up the instrument and nodded smilingly at them, and they threw down cents wrapped in paper, thinking her music much better than any the organ men made. Much encouraged, Lou went on from house to house, and was doing finely, when one of the ladies who looked out recognized the child, and asked her if her mother knew where she was. Lou had to say no, and the lady sent a maid to take her home at once. That spoiled all the fun, and poor Lou did not hear the last of her prank for a long time. But she had made 42 cents, and felt comforted when she added that handsome sum to her store. As if to console her for this disappointment, after that day several bright 10-cent pieces got into the red purse in a most mysterious manner. Lou asked everyone in the house, and all declared that they did not do it. Grandpa could not get out of his chair without help, and Nurse said she never took the purse to him, so of course it could not be he who slipped in those welcome bits of silver. Lou asked him. But he was very deaf that day, and did not seem to understand her at all. It must be fairies, she said, pondering over the puzzle, as she counted her treasure and packed it away, for now the little red purse was full. Auntie says there are no fairies, but I like to think so. Perhaps angels fly around at Christmas time as they did long ago, and love to help poor people, and put those beautiful bright things here to show that they are pleased with me. She liked that fancy, and Auntie agreed that some good spirit must have done it, and was sure they would find out the secret sometime. Lucy came regularly. And Lou always tried to see her, and so learned what she and Toddy and Joe and Jimmy wanted, but never dreamed of receiving Christmas morning. It did both little girls much good, for poor Lucy was comforted by the kindness of these friends, and Lou learned about far harder trials than the want of sugar plums. The day before Christmas she went on a grand shopping expedition with Auntie, for the purse now held $3.07. She had spent some of it for trifles for her Lucy children, and had not earned as much as she once hoped, various fits of idleness and other more amusing but less profitable work having lessened her wages. But she had enough, thanks to the good spirit, to get toys and books and candy for her family, and went joyfully away Christmas Eve to carry her little basket of gifts, accompanied by Auntie with a larger store of comforts for the grateful mother. When they got back, Lou entertained her mother with an account of the delight of the children, who never had such a Christmas before. They couldn't wait till morning, and I couldn't either, and we opened the bundles right away. And they screamed, "Mama," and jumped for joy and ate everything and hugged me. And the mother cried, she was so pleased, and the boys can go to school all neat now, and so could Lucy, only she has to take care of Toddy while her mother goes to work. Oh, it was lovely. I felt just like Santa Claus, only he doesn't stay to see people enjoy their things, and I did. Here Lou stopped for breath, and when she got it, had a fine ballet as the only way to work off her excitement at the success of her prize. It was a trial to go to bed, but she went at last, and dreamed that her Lucy children all had wings, and were flying round her bed with tambourines full of heavenly bonbons, which they showered down upon her. While Auntie in an immense nightcap stood by clapping her hands and saying, "Eat all you like, dear, this sort won't hurt you." Morning came very soon, and she popped up her head to see a long knobby stocking hanging from the mantelpiece. Out of bed skipped the little white figure, and back again, while cries of joy were heard as the treasures appeared one by one. There was a tableful beside the stocking, and Lou was so busy looking at them that she was late to breakfast. But Auntie waited for her, and they went down together some time after the bell rang. "Let me peep and see if Grandpa has found the silk handkerchief and spectacle case I made for him," whispered Lou, as they passed the parlor door, which stood half open, leaving a wide crack for the blue eyes to spy through. The old gentleman sat in his easy chair as usual, waiting while Nurse got his breakfast, but what was he doing with his long staff? Lou watched eagerly, and to her great surprise saw him lean forward, and with the hook at the end take the little red purse off the easel, open it, and slip in a small white parcel, then hang it on the gilt peg again, put away the cane, and sit rubbing his hands and laughing to himself at the success of his little trick, quite sure that this was a safe time to play it. Lou was about to cry out, and rush in, but Auntie whispered, "Don't spoil his fun yet. Go and see what is in the purse, then thank him in the way he likes best." So Lou skipped into the parlor, trying to look very innocent, and ran to open the dear red purse, as she often did, eager to see if the good fairy had added to the charity fund. Why, here's a great gold medal, and some queer, shaky writing on the paper. "Please see what it is," said Lou, very loud, hoping Grandpa would hear her this time, for his face was hidden behind the newspaper he pretended to read. "For Lou's poor's purse, from Santa Claus," read Auntie, glad that at last the kind old fairy was discovered and ready for his reward. Lou had never seen a $20 gold piece before. But she could not stop to find out whether the shining medal was money or a locket, and ran to Grandpa, crying as she pulled away the paper and threw her arms about his neck. "I've found you out, my dear old Santa Claus. Merry Christmas, Grandpa, and lots of thanks and kisses." It was pretty to see the rosy cheek against the wrinkled one, the golden and the silver heads close together, as the old man and the little girl kissed and laughed, and both talked at once for a few minutes. "Tell me all about it, you sly grandpa. What made you think of doing it that way, and not let anyone know?" cried Lou, as the old gentleman stopped to rest after a kindly cuddle, as Lou called these caresses. "Well, dear, I like to see you trying to do good with your little pennies, and I wanted to help. I'm a feeble old man, tied to my chair and of no use now. But I like a bit of fun, and love to feel that it is not quite too late to make someone happy." "Why, Grandpa, you do heaps of good, and make many, many people happy," said Lou, with another hug. "Mama told me all about the hospital for little children you built, and the money you gave to the poor soldiers in the war, and ever so many more good things you've done. I won't have you say you are of no use now. We want you to love and take care of, and we couldn't do without you, could we, Auntie?" Auntie sat on the arm of the chair with her arm round the old man's shoulder, and her only answer was a kiss. But it was enough, and Grandpa went on quite cheerfully, as he held two plump hands in his own, and watched the blooming face that looked up at him so eagerly. "When I was younger, I loved money, and wanted a great deal. I cared for nothing else, and worked hard to get it, and did get it after years of worry. But it cost me my health, and then I saw how foolish I had been, for all my money could not buy me any strength or pleasure and very little comfort. I could not take it with me when I died, and did not know what to do with it, because there was so much. So I tried to see if giving it away would not amuse me, and make me feel better about having wasted my life instead of using it wisely. The more I gave away the better I felt, and now I'm quite jolly, though I'm only a helpless old baby just fit to play jokes and love little girls. You have begun early at this pretty game of giveaway, my dear, and Auntie will see that you keep it up, so that when you are old you will have much treasure in the other world where the blessings of the poor are more precious than gold and silver." Nobody spoke for a minute as the feeble old voice stopped, and the sunshine fell on the white head like a blessing. Then Lou said very soberly, as she turned the great coin in her hand, and saw the letters that told its worth. "What shall I do with all this money? I never had so much, and I'd like to spend it in some very good and pleasant way. Can you think of something, Auntie, so I can begin at once to be like Grandpa? How would you like to pay $2 a month, so that Toddy can go to the Sunnyside nursery, and be taken care of every day while Lucy goes to school? Then she will be safe and happy, and Lucy be learning, as she longs to do, and the mother free to work," said Auntie, glad to have this dear child early learn to help those less blessed than herself. "Could I? How splendid it would be to pay for a real live baby all myself. How long would my money do it?" said Lou, charmed with the idea of a living Dolly to care for. "All winter, and provide clothes besides. You can make them yourself, and go and see Toddy, and call her your baby. This will be a sweet charity for you. And today is a good day to begin it, for this is the birthday of the divine child, who was born in a poorer place even than Lucy's sister. In his name pity and help this baby, and be sure he will bless you for it." Lou looked up at the fine picture of the Good Shepherd hanging over the sofa with holly leaves glistening round it, and felt as if she too in her humble way was about to take a helpless little lamb in her arms and comfort it. Her childish face was very sweet and sober as she said softly, "Yes, I will spend my Christmas money so. For, Auntie, I do think your sort of sweetie is better than mine, and making people happy a much wiser way to spend my pennies than in buying the nicest candy in the world." Little Lou remembered that morning long after the dear old grandfather was gone, and kept her Christmas promise so well that very soon a larger purse was needed for charity money, which she used so wisely and so happily. But all her life in one corner of her desk lay carefully folded up, with the bit of paper inside, the little red purse. Sophie's Secret. A party of young girls, in their gay bathing dresses, were sitting on the beach waiting for the tide to rise a little higher before they enjoyed the daily frolic which they called mermaiding. "I wish we could have a clam bake, but we haven't any clams, and don't know how to cook them if we had. It's such a pity all the boys have gone off on that stupid fishing excursion," said one girl, in a yellow and black striped suit which made her look like a wasp. "What is a clam bake?" "I do not know that kind of fate," asked a pretty brown-eyed girl, with an accent that betrayed the foreigner. The girls laughed at such sad ignorance, and Sophie colored, wishing she had not spoken. "Poor thing! She has never tasted a clam." "What should we do if we went to Switzerland?" said the wasp, who loved to tease. "We should give you the best we had, and not laugh at your ignorance, if you did not know all our dishes." "In my country, we have politeness, though not the clam bake," answered Sophie, with a flash of the brown eyes which warned naughty Dee to desist. "We might row to the lighthouse, and have a picnic supper." "Our mammas will let us do that alone," suggested Dora from the roof of the bathhouse, where she perched like a flamingo. "That's a good idea," cried Fanny, a slender brown girl who sat dabbling her feet in the water, with her hair streaming in the wind. "Sophie should see that, and get some of the shells she likes so much." "You are kind to think of me. I shall be glad to have a necklace of the pretty things, as a souvenir of this so charming place and my good friend," answered Sophie, with a grateful look at Fanny, whose many attentions had won the stranger's heart. "Those boys haven't left us a single boat, so we must dive off the rocks, and that isn't half so nice," said Dee, to change the subject, being ashamed of her rudeness. "A boat is just coming round the point. Perhaps we can hire that, and have some fun," cried Dora, from her perch. "There is only a girl in it, I'll hail her when she is near enough." Sophie looked about her to see where the hail was coming from. But the sky was clear, and she waited to see what new meaning this word might have, not daring to ask for fear of another laugh. While the girls watched the boat float around the farther horn of the crescent-shaped beach, we shall have time to say a few words about our little heroine. She was a 16-year-old Swiss girl, on a visit to some American friends, and had come to the seaside for a month with one of them who was an invalid. This left Sophie to the tender mercies of the young people. And they gladly welcomed the pretty creature, with her fine manners, foreign ways, and many accomplishments. But she had a quick temper, a funny little accent, and dressed so very plainly that the girls could not resist criticizing and teasing her in a way that seemed very ill-bred and unkind to the newcomer. Their free and easy ways astonished her, their curious language bewildered her, and their ignorance of many things she had been taught made her wonder at the American education she had heard so much praised. All had studied French and German. Yet few read or spoke either tongue correctly, or understood her easily when she tried to talk to them. Their music did not amount to much, and in the games they played, their want of useful information amazed Sophie. One did not know the signs of the zodiac, another could only say of cotton that it was stuff that grew down south. And a third was not sure whether a frog was an animal or a reptile, while the handwriting and spelling displayed on these occasions left much to be desired. Yet all were 15 or 16, and would soon leave school, finished, as they expressed it, but not furnished, as they should have been, with a solid, sensible education. Dress was an all-absorbing topic, sweetmeats their delight. And in confidential moments sweethearts were discussed with great freedom. Fathers were conveniences, mothers comforters, brothers plagues, and sisters ornaments or playthings according to their ages. They were not hard-hearted girls, only frivolous, idle, and fond of fun, and poor little Sophie amused them immensely till they learned to admire, love, and respect her. Coming straight from Paris, they expected to find that her trunks contained the latest fashions for demoiselles, and begged to see her dresses with girlish interest. But when Sophie obligingly showed a few simple, but pretty and appropriate gowns and hats, they exclaimed with one voice, "Why, you dress like a little girl. Don't you have ruffles and lace on your dresses? And silks and high-heeled boots and long gloves and bustles and corsets, and things like ours?" "I am a little girl," laughed Sophie, hardly understanding their dismay. "What should I do with fine toilets at school? My sisters go to balls in silk and lace, but I not yet." "How queer! Is your father poor?" asked Dee, with Yankee bluntness. "We have enough," answered Sophie, slightly knitting her dark brows. "How many servants do you keep?" "But 5, now that the little ones are grown up. Have you a piano? Continued undaunted Dee, while the others affected to be looking at the books and pictures strewn about by the hasty unpacking. We have 2 pianos, 4 violins, 3 flutes, and an organ. We love music, and all play, from Papa to little Franz. My gracious, how swell! You must live in a big house to hold all that and 8 brothers and sisters. We are not peasants. We do not live in a hut. Voila, this is my home. And Sophie laid before them a fine photograph of a large and elegant house on lovely Lake Geneva. It was droll to see the change in the faces of the girls as they looked, admired, and slyly nudged one another, enjoying Saucy Dee's astonishment, for she had stoutly insisted that the Swiss girl was a poor relation. Sophie meanwhile was folding up her plain pique and muslin frocks, with a glimmer of mirthful satisfaction in her eyes, and a tender pride in the work of loving hands now far away. Kind Fanny saw a little quiver of the lips as she smoothed the blue cornflowers in the best hat, and put her arm around Sophie, whispering, "Never mind, dear, they don't mean to be rude, it's only our Yankee way of asking questions. I like all your things, and that hat is perfectly lovely." "Indeed, yes. Dear Mama arranged it for me. I was thinking of her and longing for my morning kiss." "Do you do that every day?" asked Fanny, forgetting herself in her sympathetic interest. "Surely, yes. Papa and Mama sit always on the sofa, and we all have the handshake and the embrace each day before our morning coffee." "I do not see that here," answered Sophie, who sorely missed the affectionate respect foreign children give their parents. "Haven't time," said Fanny, smiling too, at the idea of American parents sitting still for 5 minutes in the busiest part of the busy day to kiss their sons and daughters. "It is what you call old-fashioned, but a sweet fashion to me. And since I have not the dear warm cheeks to kiss, I embrace my pictures often. See, I have them all." And Sophie unfolded a Russia leather case, displaying with pride a long row of handsome brothers and sisters with the parents in the midst. More exclamations from the girls, and increased interest in Wilhelmina Tell, as they christened the loyal Swiss maiden, who was now accepted as a companion, and soon became a favorite with old and young. They could not resist teasing her, however, her mistakes were so amusing, her little flashes of temper so dramatic, and her tongue so quick to give a sharp or witty answer when the new language did not perplex her. But Fanny always took her part, and helped her in many ways. Now they sat together on the rock, a pretty pair of mermaids with wind-tossed hair, wave-washed feet, and eyes fixed on the approaching boat. The girl who sat in it was a great contrast to the gay creatures grouped so picturesquely on the shore, for the old straw hat shaded a very anxious face, the brown calico gown covered a heart full of hopes and fears. And the boat that drifted so slowly with the incoming tide carried Tilly Reed like a young Columbus toward the new world she longed for, believed in, and was resolved to discover. It was a weather-beaten little boat, yet very pretty. For a pile of nets lay at one end, a creel of red lobsters at the other, and all between stood baskets of berries and water lilies, purple marsh rosemary and orange butterfly weed. Shells and great smooth stones such as artists like to paint little sea views on. A tame gull perched on the prow, and the morning sunshine glittered from the blue water to the bluer sky. "Oh, how pretty! Come on, please, and sell us some lilies," cried Dora, and roused Tilly from her waking dream. Pushing back her hat, she saw the girls beckoning, felt that the critical moment had come, and catching up her oars, rowed bravely on, though her cheeks reddened and her heart beat, for this venture was her last hope. And on its success depended the desire of her life. As the boat approached, the watchers forgot its cargo to look with surprise and pleasure at its rower, for she was not the rough country lass they expected to see, but a really splendid girl of 15, tall, broad-shouldered, bright-eyed, and blooming, with a certain shy dignity of her own and a very sweet smile, as she nodded and pulled in with strong, steady strokes. Before they could offer help, she had risen, planted an oar in the water, and leaping to the shore, pulled her boat high up on the beach, offering her wares with wistful eyes and a very expressive wave of both brown hands. "Everything is for sale, if you buy," said she. Charmed with the novelty of this little adventure, the girls, after scampering to the bathing houses for purses and portemonnaies, crowded around the boat like butterflies about a thistle, all eager to buy. And to discover who this bonny fisher maiden might be. "Oh, see these beauties! A dozen lilies for me! All the yellow flowers for me, they'll be so becoming at the dance tonight. Ow! That lob bites awfully. Where do you come from? Why have we never seen you before?" These were some of the exclamations and questions showered upon Tilly, as she filled little birch bark panniers with berries, dealt out flowers, or dispensed handfuls of shells. Her eyes shone, her cheeks glowed, and her heart danced in her bosom. For this was a better beginning than she had dared to hope for, and as the dimes tinkled into the tin pail she used for her till, it was the sweetest music she had ever heard. This hearty welcome banished her shyness. And in these eager, girlish customers she found it easy to confide. "I'm from the lighthouse. You have never seen me because I never came before, except with fish for the hotel. But I mean to come every day, if folks will buy my things, for I want to make some money, and this is the only way in which I can do it." Sophie glanced at the old hat and worn shoes of the speaker, and dropping a bright $50 into the pail, said in her pretty way, "For me all these lovely shells. I will make necklaces of them for my people at home as souvenirs of this charming place. If you will bring me more, I shall be much grateful to you." "Oh, thank you. I'll bring heaps. I know where to find beauties in places where other folks can't go. Please take these, you paid too much for the shells," and quick to feel the kindness of the stranger, Tilly put into her hands the little bark canoe heaped with red raspberries. Not to be outdone by the foreigner, the other girls emptied their purses in Tilly's boat also of all but the lobsters, which were ordered for the hotel. "Is that jolly bird for sale?" asked Dee, as the last berry vanished, pointing to the gull who was swimming near them while the chatter went on. "If you can catch him," laughed Tilly, whose spirits were now the gayest of the party. The girls dashed into the water, and with shrieks of merriment swam away to capture the gull, who paddled off as if he enjoyed the fun as much as they. Leaving them to splash vainly to and fro, Tilly swung the creel to her shoulder and went off to leave her lobsters, longing to dance and sing to the music of the silver clinking in her pocket. When she came back, the bird was far out of reach and the girls diving from her boat, which they had launched without leave. Too happy to care what happened now, Tilly threw herself down on the warm sand to plan a new and still finer cargo for next day. Sophie came and sat beside her while she dried her curly hair, and in 5 minutes her sympathetic face and sweet ways had won Tilly to tell all her hopes and cares and dreams. "I want schooling, and I mean to have it. I've got no folks of my own, and uncle has married again, so he doesn't need me now. If I only had a little money, I could go to school somewhere, and take care of myself. Last summer I worked at the hotel, but I didn't make much, and had to have good clothes, and that took my wages pretty much. Sewing is slow work, and baby tending leaves me no time to study. So I've kept on at home picking berries and doing what I could to pick up enough to buy books. Aunt thinks I'm a fool, but uncle, he says, go ahead, girl, and see what you can do. And I mean to show him." Tilly's brown hand came down on the sand with a resolute thump, and her clear young eyes looked bravely out across the wide sea, as if far away in the blue distance she saw her hope happily fulfilled. Sophie's eyes shone approval, for she understood this love of independence, and had come to America because she longed for new scenes and greater freedom than her native land could give her. Education is a large word, and both girls felt that desire for self-improvement that comes to all energetic natures. Sophie had laid a good foundation, but still desired more. While Tilly was just climbing up the first steep slope which rises to the heights few attain, yet all may strive for. "That is beautiful. You will do it. I am glad to help you if I may. See, I have many books, will you take some of them?" Come to my room tomorrow and take what will best please you. We will say nothing of it, and it will make me a truly great pleasure." As Sophie spoke, her little white hand touched the strong, sunburned one that turned to meet and grasp hers with grateful warmth, while Tilly's face betrayed the hunger that possessed her. For it looked as a starving girl's would look when offered a generous meal. "I will come. Thank you so much. I don't know anything, but just blunder along and do the best I can. I got so discouraged I was real desperate, and thought I'd have one try, and see if I could earn enough to get books to study this winter. Folks buy berries at the cottages, so I just added flowers and shells, and I'm going to bring my boxes of butterflies, birds' eggs, and seaweeds. I've got lots of such things, and people seem to like spending money down here. I often wish I had a little of what they throw away." Tilly paused with a sigh, then laughed as an impatient movement caused a silver clink. And slapping her pocket, she added gaily, "I won't blame them if they only throw their money in here." Sophie's hand went involuntarily toward her own pocket, where lay a plump purse, for Papa was generous, and simple Sophie had few wants. But something in the intelligent face opposite made her hesitate to offer as a gift what she felt sure Tilly would refuse, preferring to earn her education if she could. "Come often, then, and let me exchange these stupid bills for the lovely things you bring. We will come this afternoon to see you if we may, and I shall like the butterflies. I try to catch them. But people tell me I am too old to run, so I have not many." Proposed in this way, Tilly fell into the little trap, and presently rode away with all her might to set her possessions in order, and put her precious earnings in a safe place. The mermaids clung about the boat as long as they dared, making a pretty tableau for the artists on the rocks, then swam to shore, more than ever eager for the picnic on Lighthouse Island. They went, and had a merry time. While Tilly did the honors and showed them a room full of treasures gathered from earth, air, and water, for she led a lonely life, and found friends among the fishes, made playmates of the birds, and studied rocks and flowers, clouds and waves. When books were wanting, the girls bought gulls' wings for their hats, queer and lovely shells, eggs and insects, seaweeds and carved wood, and for their small brothers, birch baskets and toy ships, made by Uncle Hiram, who had been a sailor. When Tilly had sold nearly everything she possessed, for Fanny and Sophie bought whatever the others declined, she made a fire of driftwood on the rocks, cooked fish for supper, and kept them till moonrise. Telling sea stories or singing old songs, as if she could not do enough for these good fairies who had come to her when life looked hardest and the future very dark. Then she rode them home, and promising to bring loads of fruit and flowers every day, went back along a shining road, to find a great bundle of books in her dismantled room, and to fall asleep with wet eyelashes and a happy heart. 2. For a month Tilly went daily to the point with a cargo of pretty merchandise, for her patrons increased. And soon the ladies engaged her berries, the boys ordered boats enough to supply a navy, the children clamored for shells, and the girls depended on her for bouquets and garlands for the dances that ended every summer day. Uncle Hiram's fish was in demand when such a comely saleswoman offered it, so he let Tilly have her way, glad to see the old tobacco pouch in which she kept her cash fill fast with well-earned money. She really began to feel that her dream was coming true, and she would be able to go to the town and study in some great school, eking out her little fund with light work. The other girls soon lost their interest in her, but Sophie never did. And many a book went to the island in the empty baskets, many a helpful word was said over the lilies or wild honeysuckle Sophie loved to wear. And many a lesson was given in the bare room in the lighthouse tower which no one knew about but the gulls and the sea winds sweeping by the little window where the two heads leaned together over one page. "You will do it, Tilly, I am very sure. Such a will and such a memory will make a way for you, and one day I shall see you teaching as you wish. Keep the brave heart, and all will be well with you," said Sophie, when the grand breaking up came in September, and the girls were parting down behind the deserted bathhouses. "Oh, Miss Sophie, what should I have done without you? Don't think I haven't seen and known all the kind things you have said and done for me. I'll never forget, And I do hope I'll be able to thank you some day, cried grateful Tilly, with tears in her clear eyes that seldom wept over her own troubles. I am thanked if you do well. Adieu, write to me, and remember always that I am your friend. Then they kissed with girlish warmth, and Tilly rowed away to the lonely island, while Sophie lingered on the shore, her handkerchief fluttering in the wind, till the boat vanished and the waves had washed away their footprints on the sand. 3. December snow was falling fast, and the wintry wind whistled through the streets. But it was warm and cozy in the luxurious parlor where Dee and Do were sitting making Christmas presents, and planning what they would wear at the party Fanny was to give on Christmas Eve. If I can get Mama to buy me a new dress, I shall have something yellow. It is always becoming to brunettes, and I'm so tired of red, said Dee, giving a last touch to the lace that trimmed a blue satin sachet for Fanny. That will be lovely. I shall have pink, with roses of the same color. Under muslin it is perfectly sweet. And Dora eyed the sunflower she was embroidering as if she already saw the new toilet before her. Fan always wears blue, so we shall make a nice contrast. She is coming over to show me about finishing off my banner screen, and I asked Sophie to come with her. I want to know what she is going to wear, said Dee, taking a little sniff at the violet-scented bag. That old white cashmere. Just think. I asked her why she didn't get a new one, and she laughed and said she couldn't afford it. Fan told me Sophie's father sent her $100 not long ago, yet she hasn't got a thing that we know of. I do think she's mean. She bought a great bundle of books. I was there when the parcel came, and I peeped while she was out of the room, because she put it away in a great hurry. I'm afraid she is mean, for she never buys a bit of candy, and she wears shabby boots and gloves, and she has made over her old hat instead of having that lovely one with the pheasant's breast in it. She's very queer. But I can't help liking her, she's so pretty and bright and obliging. I'd give anything if I could speak 3 languages and play as she does. So would I. It seems so elegant to be able to talk to foreigners. Papa had some Frenchmen to dinner the other day, and they were so pleased to find they needn't speak English to Sophie. I couldn't get on at all, and I was so mortified when Papa said all the money he had spent on my languages was thrown away. I wouldn't mind. It's so much easier to learn those things abroad. She would be a goose if she didn't speak French better than we do. There's Fan. She looks as if something had happened. I hope no one is ill and the party spoiled. As Dora spoke, both girls looked out to see Fanny shaking the snow from her sealskin sack on the doorstep, then Do hastened to meet her, while Dee hid the sachet, and was hard at work on an old gold sofa cushion when the newcomer entered. What's the matter? Where's Sophie? Exclaimed the girls together, as Fan threw off her wraps and sat down with a tragic sigh. She will be along in a few minutes. I'm disappointed in her. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen them. Promise not to breathe a word to a living soul, and I'll tell you something dreadful, began Fanny, in a tone that caused her friends to drop their work and draw their chairs nearer, as they solemnly vowed eternal silence. I've seen Sophie's Christmas presents, all but mine, and they are just nothing at all. She hasn't bought a thing, not even ribbons, lace, or silk, to make up prettily as we do. Only a painted shell for one, an acorn emery for another, her ivory fan with a new tassel for a third, and I suspect one of those nice handkerchiefs embroidered by the nuns for me, or her silver filigree necklace. I saw the box in the drawer with the other things. She's knit woolen cuffs and tippets for the children, and got some 8-cent calico gowns for the servants. I don't know how people do things in Switzerland, but I do know that if I had $100 in my pocket, I would be more generous than that. As Fanny paused, out of breath, Dee and Do groaned in sympathy, for this was indeed a sad state of things, because the girls had a code that Christmas being the season for gifts, extravagance would be forgiven then as at no other time. I have a lovely smelling bottle for her, but I've a great mind not to give it now, cried Dee, feeling defrauded of the bracelet she had plainly hinted she would like. I shall heap coals of fire on her head by giving her that. And Dora displayed a very useless but very pretty apron of muslin, lace, and carnation ribbon. It isn't the worth of the things. I don't care for that so much as I do for being disappointed in her. And I have been lately in more ways than one, said Fanny, listlessly taking up the screen she was to finish. She used to tell me everything, and now she doesn't. I'm sure she has some sort of a secret, and I do think I ought to know it. I found her smiling over a letter one day, and she whisked it into her pocket and never said a word about it. I always stood by her, and I do feel hurt. I should think you might. It's real naughty of her, and I shall tell her so. Perhaps she'll confide in you then, and you can just give me a hint. I always liked Sophie, and never thought of not giving my present, said Dora, persuasively, for both girls were now dying with curiosity to know the secret. I'll have it out of her, without any dodging or bribing. I'm not afraid of any one, and I shall ask her straight out, no matter how much she scowls at me, said dauntless Dee, with a threatening nod. There she is. Let us see you do it now, cried Fanny, as the bell rang, and a clear voice was heard a moment later asking if Mademoiselle was in. You shall, and Dee looked ready for any audacity. I'll wager a box of candy that you don't find out a thing, whispered Do. Done, answered Dee, and then turned to meet Sophie, who came in looking as fresh as an alpine rose with the wintry wind. You dear thing. We were just talking of you. Sit here and get warm, and let us show you our gifts. We are almost done, but it seems as if it got to be a harder job each Christmas. Don't you find it so? But no. I think it the most charming work of all the year, answered Sophie, greeting her friend, and putting her well-worn boots toward the fire to dry. Perhaps you don't make as much of Christmas as we do, or give such expensive presents. That would make a great difference, you know, said Dee, as she lifted a cloth from the table where her own generous store of gifts was set forth. I had a piano last year, a set of jewels, and many pretty trifles from all at home. Here is one. And pulling the fine gold chain hidden under her frills, Sophie showed a locket set thick with pearls, containing a picture of her mother. It must be so nice to be rich, and able to make such fine presents. I've got something for you. But I shall be ashamed of it after I see your gift to me, I'm afraid. Fan and Dora were working as if their bread depended on it, while Dee, with a naughty twinkle in her eye, affected to be rearranging her pretty table as she talked. Do not fear that, my gifts this year are very simple ones. I did not know your custom, and now it is too late. My comfort is that you need nothing, and having so much, you will not care for my what you call coming short. Was it the fire that made Sophie's face look so hot, and a cold that gave a husky sort of tone to her usually clear voice? A curious expression came into her face as her eyes roved from the table to the gay trifles in her friend's hands. And she opened her lips as if to add something impulsively. But nothing came, and for a moment she looked straight out at the storm as if she had forgotten where she was. Shortcoming is the proper way to speak it, but never mind that, and tell me why you say, too late, asked Dee, bent on winning her wager. Christmas comes in 3 days, and I have no time, began Sophie. But with money one can buy plenty of lovely things in one day, said Dee. No, it is better to put a little love and hard work into what we give to friends. I have done that with my trifles, and another year I shall be more ready. There was an uncomfortable pause, for Sophie did not speak with her usual frankness, but looked both proud and ashamed, and seemed anxious to change the subject, as she began to admire Dora's work, which had made very little progress during the last 15 minutes. Fanny glanced at Dee with a smile that made the other toss her head and return to the charge with renewed vigor. Sophie, will you do me a favor? With much pleasure. Do has promised me a whole box of French bonbons, and if you will answer 3 questions, you shall have it. Allons, said Sophie, smiling. Haven't you a secret? Asked Dee, gravely. Yes. Will you tell us? No. Dee paused before she asked her last question, and Fan and Dora waited breathlessly, while Sophie knit her brows and looked uneasy. Why not? Because I do not wish to tell it. Will you tell if we guess? Try. You are engaged. At this absurd suggestion Sophie laughed gaily, and shook her curly head. Do you think we are betrothed at 16 in my country? I know that is an engagement ring. You made such a time about it when you lost it in the water, and cried for joy when Tilly dived and found it. Ah, yes, I was truly glad. Dear Tilly, never do I forget that kindness. And Sophie kissed the little pearl ring in her impulsive way, while her eyes sparkled and the frown vanished. I know a sweetheart gave it, insisted Dee, sure now she had found a clue to the secret. He did, and Sophie hung her head in a sentimental way that made the three girls crowd nearer with faces full of interest. Do tell us all about it, dear. It's so interesting to hear love stories. What is his name? Cried Dora. Hermann, simpered Sophie, drooping still more, while her lips trembled with suppressed emotion of some sort. How lovely, sighed Fanny, who was very romantic. Tell on, do. Is he handsome? To me the finest man in all the world, confessed Sophie, as she hid her face. And you love him? I adore him, and Sophie clasped her hands so dramatically that the girls were a little startled, yet charmed at this discovery. Have you his picture? Asked Dee, feeling that she had won her wager now. Yes, and pulling out the locket again, Sophie showed in the other side the face of a fine old gentleman who looked very like herself. It's your father! Exclaimed Fanny, rolling her blue eyes excitedly. You are a humbug, cried Dora. Then you fibbed about the ring, said Dee, crossly. Never. It is Mamma's betrothal ring. But her finger grew too plump, and when I left home she gave the ring to me as a charm to keep me safe. Ah, ha. I have my little joke as well as you, and the laugh is for me this time. And falling back among the sofa cushions, Sophie enjoyed it as only a gay girl could. Do and Fanny joined her, but Dee was much disgusted, and vowed she would discover the secret and keep all the bonbons to herself. You are most welcome. But I will not tell until I like, and then to Fanny first. She will not have ridicule for what I do, but say it is well, and be glad with me. Come now and work. I will plait these ribbons, or paint a wild rose on this pretty fan. It is too plain now. Will you that I do it, dear Dee? The kind tone and the prospect of such an ornament to her gift appeased Dee somewhat. But the mirthful malice in Sophie's eyes made the other more than ever determined to be even with her by and by. Christmas Eve came, and found Dee still in the dark, which fact nettled her sadly, for Sophie tormented her and amused the other girls by pretended confidences and dark hints at the mystery which might never, never be disclosed. Fan had determined to have an unusually jolly party. So she invited only her chosen friends, and opened the festivities with a Christmas tree, as the prettiest way of exchanging gifts and providing jokes for the evening in the shape of delusive bottles, animals full of candy, and every sort of musical instrument to be used in an impromptu concert afterward. The presents to one another were done up in secure parcels, so that they might burst upon the public eye in all their freshness. Dee was very curious to know what Fan was going to give her, for Fanny was a generous creature and loved to give. Dee was a little jealous of her love for Sophie, and couldn't rest till she discovered which was to get the finer gift. So she went early and slipped into the room where the tree stood, to peep and pick a bit, as well as to hang up a few trifles of her own. She guessed several things by feeling the parcels. But one excited her curiosity intensely, and she could not resist turning it about and pulling up one corner of the lid. It was a flat box, prettily ornamented with seaweeds like red lace, and tied with scarlet ribbons. A tantalizing glimpse of jeweler's cotton, gold clasps, and something rose-colored conquered Dee's last scruples. And she was just about to untie the ribbons when she heard Fanny's voice, and had only time to replace the box, pick up a paper that had fallen out of it, and fly up the back stairs to the dressing-room, where she found Sophie and Dora surveying each other as girls always do before they go down. You look like a daisy, cried Dee, admiring Dora with great interest, because she felt ashamed of her prying, and the stolen note in her pocket. "And you like a dandelion," returned Doo, falling back a step to get a good view of Dee's gold-colored dress and black velvet bows. "Sophie is a lily of the valley, all in green and white," added Fanny, coming in with her own blue skirts waving in the breeze. "It does me very well. Little girls do not need grand toilets, and I am fine enough for a peasant," laughed Sophie, as she settled the fresh ribbons on her simple white cashmere and the holly wreath in her brown hair. But secretly longing for the fine dress she might have had. "Why didn't you wear your silver necklace?" "It would be lovely on your pretty neck," said Dee, longing to know if she had given the trinket away. But Sophie was not to be caught, and said with a contented smile, "I do not care for ornaments unless someone I love gives me them. I had red roses for my bouquet de corsage. But the poor Madame Page was so triste, I left them on her table to remember her of me. It seemed so heartless to go and dance while she had only pain, but she wished it. Dear little Sophie, how good you are." And warm-hearted Fan kissed the blooming face that needed no roses to make it sweet and gay. Half an hour later, 20 girls and boys were dancing round the brilliant tree. Then its boughs were stripped. Every one seemed contented. Even Sophie's little gifts gave pleasure, because with each went a merry or affectionate verse, which made great fun on being read aloud. She was quite loaded with pretty things, and had no words to express her gratitude and pleasure. "Ah, you are all so good to me. And I have nothing beautiful for you. I receive much and give little, but I cannot help it. Wait a little and I will redeem myself," she said to Fanny, with eyes full of tears, and a lap heaped with gay and useful things. "Never mind that now. But look at this, for here's still another offering of friendship, and a very charming one, to judge by the outside," answered Fan, bringing the white box with the seaweed ornaments. Sophie opened it, and cries of admiration followed, for lying on the soft cotton was a lovely set of coral. Rosy pink branches, highly polished and fastened with gold clasps, formed necklace, bracelets, and a spray for the bosom. No note or card appeared, and the girls crowded round to admire and wonder who could have sent so valuable a gift. "Can't you guess, Sophie?" cried Dora, longing to own the pretty things. "I should believe I knew, but it is too costly." "How came the parcel, Fan?" "I think you must know all," and Sophie turned the box about, searching vainly for a name. "An expressman left it, and Jane took off the wet paper and put it on my table with the other things. Here's the wrapper. Do you know that writing?" and Fan offered the brown paper which she had kept. "No, and the label is all mud, so I cannot see the place." "Ah, well, I shall discover some day, but I should like to thank this generous friend at once. See now, how fine I am. I do myself the honor to wear them at once." Smiling with girlish delight at her pretty ornaments, Sophie clasped the bracelets on her round arms, the necklace about her white throat, and set the rosy spray in the lace on her bosom. Then she took a little dance down the room and found herself before Dee, who was looking at her with an expression of naughty satisfaction on her face. "Don't you wish you knew who sent them?" "Indeed, yes," and Sophie paused abruptly. "Well, I know, and I won't tell till I like. It's my turn to have a secret, and I mean to keep it." "But it is not right," began Sophie, with indignation. "Tell me yours, and I'll tell mine," said Dee, teasingly. "I will not. You have no right to touch my gifts, and I am sure you have done it, else how know you who sends this fine cadeau?" cried Sophie, with the flash Dee liked to see. Here Fanny interposed, "If you have any note or card belonging to Sophie, give it up at once. She shall not be tormented. Out with it, Dee. I see your hand in your pocket, and I'm sure you have been in mischief. Take your old letter, then. I know what's in it, and if I can't keep my secret for fun, Sophie shall not have hers." That Tilly sent the coral, and Sophie spent her $100 in books and clothes for that queer girl, who'd better stay among her lobsters than try to be a lady, cried Dee, bent on telling all she knew. while Sophie was reading her letter eagerly. "Is it true?" asked Dora, for the four girls were in a corner together, and the rest of the company busy pulling crackers. "Just like her. I thought it was that, but she wouldn't tell." "Tell us now, Sophie, for I think it was truly sweet and beautiful to help that poor girl, and let us say hard things of you," cried Fanny, as her friend looked up with a face and a heart too full of happiness to help overflowing into words. "Yes. I will tell you now. It was foolish, perhaps, but I did not want to be praised, and I loved to help that good Tilly. You know she worked all summer and made a little sum. So glad, so proud she was, and planned to study that she might go to school this winter. Well, in October the uncle fell very ill, and Tilly gave all her money for the doctors. The uncle had been kind to her, she did not forget. She was glad to help, and told no one but me. Then I said, what better can I do with my father's gift than give it to the dear creature, and let her lose no time? I do it, she will not at first, but I write and say, it must be, and she submits. She is made neat with some little dresses, and she goes at last, to be so happy and do so well that I am proud of her. Is not that better than fine toilets and rich gifts to those who need nothing? Truly, yes. Yet I confess it cost me pain to give up my plans for Christmas, and to seem selfish or ungrateful. Forgive me that. Yes, indeed, you dear generous thing, cried Fan and Dora, touched by the truth. But how came Tilly to send you such a splendid present? Asked Dee. Shouldn't think you, Dee, like her to spend your money in such things. She did not. A sea captain, a friend of the uncle, gave her these lovely ornaments, and she sends them to me with a letter that is more precious than all the coral in the sea. I cannot read it, but of all my gifts this is the dearest and the best. Sophie had spoken eagerly, and her face, her voice, her gestures, made the little story eloquent, but with the last words she clasped the letter to her bosom as if it well repaid her for all the sacrifices she had made. They might seem small to others, but she was sensitive and proud, anxious to be loved in the strange country, and fond of giving, so it cost her many tears to seem mean and thoughtless, to go poorly dressed, and be thought hardly of by those she wished to please. She did not like to tell of her own generosity, because it seemed like boasting, and she was not sure that it had been wise to give so much. Therefore, she waited to see if Tilly was worthy of the trust reposed in her. And she now found a balm for many wounds in the loving letter that came with the beautiful and unexpected gift. Dee listened with hot cheeks, and when Sophie paused, she whispered regretfully, "Forgive me, I was wrong. I'll keep your gift all my life to remember you by, for you are the best and dearest girl I know." Then with a hasty kiss she ran away, carrying with great care the white shell on which Sophie had painted a dainty little picture of the mermaids waiting for the pretty boat that brought good fortune to poor Tilly. And this lesson to those who were hereafter her faithful friends. Dolly's bedstead. Aunt Pen, where is Ariadne to sleep, please? I wanted to bring her cradle, but Mamma said it would take up so much room I could not. And Alice looked about her for a resting place for her Dolly as anxiously as if Ariadne had been a live baby. Can't she lie on the sofa? Asked Aunt Pen, with that sad want of interest in such important matters which grown-up people so often show. No, indeed. Someone would sit down on her, of course, and I won't have my darling smashed. You wouldn't like it yourself, Auntie, and I'm surprised at your proposing such a thing, cried Alice, clasping her babe with a face full of maternal indignation. I beg your pardon. I really forgot that danger. I'm not so used to infants as you are, and that accounts for it. Now I think of it, there's a little bedstead up garret, and you can have that. You will find it done up in a paper in the great blue chest where all our old toys are kept. Appeased by Aunt Pen's apology, Alice trotted to the attic, found the bedstead, and came trotting back with a disappointed look on her face. It is such a funny, old-fashioned thing I don't know that Ariadne will consent to lie in it. Anyway, I must air the feather bed and pillows first, or she will get cold. I wish I could wash the sheets too, they are so yellow. But there is no time now, said the little girl, bustling round as she spoke, and laying the little bed furniture out on the rug. "Everything is quite clean, my dear." "I am sure of that, for I washed the sheets and coverlet myself not long ago, because I found a nest of little mice there the last time I looked," answered Aunt Pen, with her eyes fixed thoughtfully on the small bedstead. "I guess you used to be fond of it when you were a little girl, and that's why you keep it so nicely now, isn't it?" asked Alice, as she dusted the carved posts and patted the canvas sacking. "Yes, there's quite a little romance about that bed. And I love it so that I never can give it away, but keep it mended up and in order for the sake of old times and poor Val," said Aunt Pen, smiling and sighing in the same breath. "Oh, tell about it. I do like to hear stories, and so does Ariadne," cried Alice, hastily opening Dolly's eyes, that she might express her interest in the only way permitted her. "Well, dear, I'll tell you this true tale of long ago, and while you listen you can be making a new blanket for the bed. Mrs. Mouse nibbled holes in the other one, and her babies made a mess of it, so I burned it up. Here is a nice little square of flannel, and there are blue, red, and green worsteds for you to work round the edges with. Now that is just splendid. I love to work with crewels, and I'll put little quirls and things in the corners. I can do it all myself, so tell away, please, Auntie." And Alice settled herself with great satisfaction, while Ariadne sat bolt upright in her own armchair and stared at Aunt Pen in a way that would have been very embarrassing if her round blue eyes had had a particle of expression in them. When I was about 10 years old, it was the joy of my heart to go every Saturday afternoon to see my nurse, Betsy Brown. She no longer lived out, but was married to a pilot, and had a home of her own down in what we used to call the watery part of the city. A funny little house, so close to the wharves that when one looked out there were masts going to and fro over the housetops, and from the upper windows I could see the blue ocean. Betsy had a boy with club feet, and a brother who was deformed. But Bobby was my pet playmate, and Valentine my best friend. My chief pleasure was in seeing him work at his turning lathe, for he was very ingenious, and made all sorts of useful and pretty things. But the best thing he did was to cure the lame feet of his little nephew. In those days there were few doctors who attended to such troubles, and they were very expensive. So poor Bobby had gone hobbling about ever since he was born with his little feet turned in. Uncle Val could sympathize with him, and though he knew there was no cure for his own crooked back, he did his best to help the boy. He made a very simple apparatus for straightening the crippled feet, just 2 wooden splints, with wooden screws to loosen or tighten the pressure, and with patience, hope, and faith, he worked over the child till the feet were right. And Bobby could run and play like other children. Oh, Aunt Pen, wasn't that lovely? And did he really do it all himself? How clever he must have been, cried Alice, puckering the new blanket in the pleasant interest of the moment. He was very clever for a lad of 18. But that was not all he did. Bobby's cure was a long one, and I only saw the happy end of it, yet I remember how we all rejoiced, and how proud Betsy was of her brother. My father wrote an account of it for some medical journal, and it was much talked about in our little circle, so much, indeed, that an aunt of ours who had a lame boy came to see Val and talked it all over with him. Val was much pleased, and offered to try and cure her son if she would let the boy come and live with him, for it needed great skill and constant care to work the screws just right, and tend the poor little feet gently. Aunt Dolly said no at once to that plan, for how could she let her precious boy go and live in that little house down in the poor part of the city? There was no other way, however, for Val would not leave his sister and his beloved lathe, and was wise enough to see how impossible it would be to have his own way with the child in a house where everyone obeyed his whims and petted him, as such afflicted children usually are petted. So Val stood firm, and for a time nothing was done. I was much interested in the affair, and every time I saw my cousin Gus I told him what nice times I had down there. How strong and lively Bobby was, and declared my firm belief that Val could cure every disease under the sun. These glowing accounts made Gus want to go, and when he set his heart on anything he always got it. So in the end Aunt Dolly consented, and Gus went to board in the little house, much to the wonder of some folks. The plan succeeded capitally, however, and Gus thrived like a dandelion in springtime. For simple food, plenty of air, no foolish indulgence, and the most faithful care, built up the little lad in a way that astonished and delighted us all. The feet improved slowly. And Val was sure that in time they would be all right, for everything helped on the good work. Dear me, what happy days I used to spend at Betsy's. Sometimes Isaac, the jolly, bluff pilot, would take us out in his boat. And then what rosy cheeks and good appetites we got. Sometimes we played in Val's shop, and watched him make pretty things or helped him in some easy job, for he liked to have us near him. And, oh, my heart, what delicious suppers Betsy used to get us in the front room, where all sorts of queer sea treasures were collected, shells, coral, and seaweed. Odd pictures of ships and fish, and old books full of sailor songs and thrilling tales of wrecks. I wish I had been there, interrupted Alice. Is the house all gone, Auntie? All gone, dear, and every one of that merry party but myself, answered Aunt Pen, with a sigh. Don't think about the sad part of it, but go on and tell about the bed, please, said Alice, feeling that it was about time this interesting piece of furniture appeared in the story. Well, that was made to comfort me when Gus went home, as he did after staying 2 years. Yes, he went home with straight feet, the heartiest, happiest little lad I ever saw. I was heartbroken at losing my playmate, and mourned for him as bitterly as a child could, till Val comforted me, not only by the cunning bedstead for my doll, but by 100 kindly words and acts, for which I never thanked him half enough. Aunt Dolly and my father were so grateful and pleased at Val's success with Gus that they helped him in a plan he had some years later, when he took a larger house in a better place, and with Betsy as nurse, opened a small hospital for the cure of deformed feet. It was an excellent plan, and all was going well, when poor Val wasted rapidly away, and died just as his work began to bring him money and some honor. That was very bad. But what became of Bobby and Gus? Asked Alice, who was not of an age to care much about the sad part of any story. Bob became a sea captain, and was an excellent fellow till he went down with his ship in a storm after rescuing all his crew, even to the cabin boy. I'm proud of Bob, and keep those 2 great pearly shells in memory of him, for he brought them to me after his first voyage. Aunt Pen's eyes lit up, and her voice rose as she spoke with real pride and affection of honest Captain Brown, who to her was always little Bob. I like that, it was so brave and good. But I do wish he had been saved, for then I could have seen him. And maybe he would have brought me a big green parrot that could say funny things. What became of Gus? Asked Alice, after a moment spent in the delightful thought of owning a green parrot with a red tail. Ah, my dear, I wish I knew, exclaimed Aunt Pen, so earnestly that Alice dropped her work, astonished at the change in that usually quiet face. Don't tell any more if you, rather not, said the little girl, feeling instinctively that she had touched some tender string. But Aunt Pen only stroked her curly head and went on in a softer tone, with her eyes fixed upon a faded picture that had hung over her work-table ever since Alice could remember. I like to tell you, dear, because I want you to love the memory of this old friend of mine. Gus went to sea also, much against his mother's will, for the years spent in the little house near the wharf had given the boy a taste for salt water, and he could not overcome it, though he tried. He sailed with Captain Bob all round the world, and would have been with him on that last voyage if a sudden whim had not kept him ashore. More than this we don't know, and for 7 years have had no tidings of him. The others give him up, feeling sure that he was lost in the wild hill country of India, whither he went in search of adventures. I suppose they are right. But I cannot make it true, and still hope to see the dear boy back, or at least to hear some news of him. Wouldn't he be rather an old boy now, Aunt Pen? Asked Alice, softly. For she wanted to chase away the load of pain with a smile if she could. Bless my heart, so he would. 40, at least. Well, he never will seem old to me, though his hair should be grey when he comes home. And Aunt Pen did smile as her eyes went back to the faded picture with a tender look that made Alice say timidly, while she laid her blooming cheek against her aunt's hand. "Would you mind if I asked if it was Gus who gave you this pretty ring? And was your sweetheart once? Mama told me you had one, and he was dead, so I must never ask why you did Aunt Mary as she did." "Yes, he gave me this, and was to come back in a year or two. But I have never seen him since, and never shall, I fear, till we all meet over the great sea at last." There Aunt Pen broke down, and spreading her hands before her face, sat so still that Alice feared to stir. Even her careless child's heart was full of pity now, and two great tears rolled down upon the little blanket, to lie sparkling like drops of dew in the heart of the very remarkable red rose she was working in the middle. Then it was that Ariadne distinguished herself, and proved beyond a doubt that her blue china eyes were worth something. A large, brown, breezy-looking man had been peeping in from the door for several moments, and listening in the most improper manner. No one saw him but Ariadne, and how could she warn the others, poor thing, when she hadn't a tongue in her head? Don't tell me that dolls haven't hearts somewhere in their sawdust bosoms. I know better, and I am firmly convinced that Ariadne's was full of sympathy for Aunt Pen. Else why should she, a well-bred doll, suddenly and without the least apparent cause, slip out of her chair and fall upon her china nose with a loud whack? Alice jumped up to catch her darling, and Aunt Pen lifted her head to see what was the matter, and the big brown man, giving his hat a toss, came into the room like a whirlwind. Alice, Ariadne, Bedstead, and Blanket were suddenly swept into a corner by some mysterious means, and lay there in a heap, while the two grown people fell into each other's arms, exclaiming, "Pen! Gus!" I don't know which stared the hardest at this dreadful proceeding, Alice or Ariadne, but I do know that every one was very happy afterward, and that the precious little bedstead was not smashed, for I have seen it with my own eyes. Trudel's siege. "Grandmother, what is this curious picture about?" said little Gertrude, or Trudel, as they called her, looking up from the red book that lay on her knee, one Sunday morning, when she and the grandmother sat sadly together in the neat kitchen. For the father was very ill, and the poor mother seldom left him. The old woman put on her round spectacles, which made her look as wise as an owl, and turned to answer the child, who had been as quiet as a mouse for a long time, looking at the strange pictures in the ancient book. "Ah, my dear, that tells about a very famous and glorious thing that happened long ago at the siege of Leyden. You can read it for yourself some day. Please tell me now. Why are the houses half under water, and ships sailing among them, and people leaning over the walls of the city? And why is that boy waving his hands on the tower, where the men are running away in a great smoke?" asked Trudel, too curious to wait till she could read the long hard words on the yellow pages. "Well, dear, this is the story, and you shall hear how brave men and women, and children too, were in those days. The cruel Spaniards came and besieged the city for many months, but the faithful people would not give up, though nearly starved to death. When all the bread and meat were gone and the gardens empty, they ate grass and herbs and horses, and even dogs and cats, trying to hold out till help came to them." "Did little girls really eat their pussies?" "Oh, I'd die before I would kill my dear Jan," cried Trudel, hugging the pretty kitten that purred in her lap. "Yes, the children ate their pets. And so would you if it would save your father or mother from starving. We know what hunger is. But we won't eat Jan yet." The old woman sighed as she glanced from the empty table to the hearth where no fire burned. "Did help come in the ships?" asked the child, bending her face over the book to hide the tears that filled her eyes, for she was very hungry, and had had only a crust for breakfast. "Our good Prince of Orange was trying to help them. But the Spaniards were all around the city and he had not men enough to fight them by land, so he sent carrier doves with letters to tell the people that he was going to cut through the great dikes that kept the sea out, and let the water flow over the country so as to drive the enemy from his camp, for the city stood upon high ground, and would be safe. Then the ships, with food, could sail over the drowned land and save the brave people." "Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad. These are the bad Spaniards running away, and these are poor people stretching out their hands for the bread. But what is the boy doing, in the funny tower where the wall has tumbled down? Cried Trudel, much excited. The smoke of burning houses rose between the city and the port so the people could not see that the Spaniards had run away. And they were afraid the ships could not get safely by. But a boy who was scrambling about as boys always are wherever there is danger, fire, and fighting, saw the enemy go, and ran to the deserted tower to shout and beckon to the ships to come on at once. For the wind had changed and soon the tide would flow back and leave them stranded. Nice boy. I wish I had been there to see him and help the poor people, said Trudel, patting the funny little figure sticking out of the pepper-pot tower like a jack-in-the-box. If children keep their wits about them and are brave, they can always help in some way, my dear. We don't have such dreadful wars now. But the dear God knows we have troubles enough, and need all our courage and faith to be patient in times like these. And the grandmother folded her thin hands with another sigh, as she thought of her poor son dying for want of a few comforts, after working long and faithfully for a hard master who never came to offer any help, though a very rich man. Did they eat the carrier doves? Asked Trudel, still intent on the story. No, child. They fed and cared for them while they lived, and when they died, stuffed and set them up in the Stadthouse, so grateful were the brave burghers for the good news the dear birds brought. That is the best part of all. I like that story very much. And Trudel turned the pages to find another, little dreaming what a carrier dove she herself was soon to become. Poor Hans Dort and his family were nearly as distressed as the besieged people of Leyden, for poverty stood at the door, hunger and sickness were within, and no ship was anywhere seen coming to bring help. The father, who was a linen weaver, could no longer work in the great factory, the mother, who was a lace-maker, had to leave her work to nurse him, and the old woman could earn only a trifle by her knitting, being lame and feeble. Little Trudel did what she could, sold the stockings to get bread and medicine, picked up wood for the fire, gathered herbs for the poor soup, and ran errands for the market women, who paid her with unsaleable fruit, withered vegetables, and now and then a bit of meat. But market day came but once a week, and it was very hard to find food for the hungry mouths meantime. The Dorts were too proud to beg, so they suffered in silence, praying that help would come before it was too late to save the sick and old. No other picture in the quaint book interested Trudel so much as that of the siege of Leyden, and she went back to it, thinking over the story till hunger made her look about for something to eat as eagerly as the poor starving burghers. Here, child, is a good crust. It is too hard for me. I kept it for you, it's the last except that bit for your mother, said the old woman, pulling a dry crust from her jacket with a smile. For though starving herself, the brave old soul thought only of her darling. Trudel's little white teeth gnawed savagely at the hard bread, and Jan ate the crumbs as if he too needed food. As she saw him purring about her feet, there came into the child's head a sudden idea, born of the brave story and of the cares that made her old before her time. Poor Jan gets thinner and thinner every day. If we are to eat him, we must do it soon, or he will not be worth cooking, she said with a curious look on the face that used to be so round and rosy, and now was white, thin, and anxious. Bless the child. We won't eat the poor beast. But it would be kind to give him away to someone who could feed him well. Go now, dear, and get a jug of fresh water. The father will need it, and so will you, for that crust is a dry dinner for my darling. As she spoke, the old woman held the little girl close for a minute, and Trudel clung to her silently, finding the help she needed for her sacrifice in the love and the example Grandma gave her. Then she ran away, with the brown jug in one hand, the pretty kitten on her arm, and courage in her little heart. It was a poor neighborhood where the weavers and lace-makers lived. But nearly every one had a good dinner on Sunday, and on her way to the fountain Trudel saw many well-spread tables, smelled the good soup in many kettles, and looked enviously at the plump children sitting quietly on the doorsteps in round caps and wooden shoes, waiting to be called in to eat of the big loaves, the brown sausages, and the cabbage soup smoking on the hearth. When she came to the baker's house, her heart began to beat, and she hugged Jan so close it was well he was thin, or he would have mewed under the tender farewell squeezes his little mistress gave him. With a timid hand Trudel knocked, and then went in to find Vrouw Hertz and her 5 boys and girls at table, with good roast meat and bread and cheese and beer before them. Oh, the dear cat! The pretty cat! Let me pat him. Hear him mew, and see his soft white coat, cried the children, before Trudel could speak, for they admired the snow-white kitten very much, and had often begged for it. Trudel had made up her mind to give up to them at last her one treasure. But she wished to be paid for it, and was bound to tell her plan. Jan helped her, for smelling the meat, he leaped from her arms to the table and began to gnaw a bone on Dirk's plate, which so amused the young people that they did not hear Trudel say to their mother in a low voice, with red cheeks and beseeching eyes, "Dear Vrouw Hertz, the father is very ill. The mother cannot work at her lace in the dark room, and grandma makes but little by knitting, though I help all I can. We have no food, can you give me a loaf of bread in exchange for Jan? I have nothing else to sell, and the children want him much." Trudel's eyes were full and her lips trembled, as she ended with a look that went straight to stout Mother Hertz's kind heart, and told the whole sad story. Bless the dear child. Indeed, yes, a loaf and welcome, and see here, a good sausage also. Brenda, go fill the jug with milk. It is excellent for the sick man. As for the cat, let it stay a while and get fat, then we will see. It is a pretty beast and worth many loaves of bread, so come again, Trudel, and do not suffer hunger while I have much bread. As the kind woman spoke, she had bustled about, and before Trudel could get her breath, a big loaf, a long sausage, and a jug of fresh milk were in her apron and hands, and a motherly kiss made the gifts all the easier to take. Returning it heartily, and telling the children to be kind to Jan, she hastened home to burst into the quiet room, crying joyfully, "See, grandmother, here is food, all mine. I bought it. Come, come, and eat. Now, dear heaven, what do I see? Where did the blessed bread come from?" asked the old woman, hugging the big loaf, and eyeing the sausage with such hunger in her face that Trudel ran for the knife and cup, and held a draught of fresh milk to her grandmother's lips before she could answer a single question. "Stay, child, let us give thanks before we eat." Never was food more welcome or hearts more grateful, and folding her hands, the pious old woman blessed the meal that seemed to fall from heaven on that bare table. Then Trudel cut the crusty slice for herself, a large soft one for grandmother, with a good bit of sausage, and refilled the cup. Another portion and cup went upstairs to mother, whom she found asleep, with the father's hot hand in hers. So leaving the surprise for her waking, Trudel crept down to eat her own dinner, as hungry as a little wolf, amusing herself with making the old woman guess where and how she got this fine feast. "This is our siege, grandmother. And we are eating Jan," she said at last, with the merriest laugh she had given for weeks. "Eating Jan," cried the old woman, staring at the sausage, as if for a moment she feared the kitten had been turned into that welcome shape by some miracle. Still laughing, Trudel told her story, and was well rewarded for her childish sacrifice by the look in grandmother's face as she said with a tender kiss, "Thou art a carrier dove, my darling, coming home with good news and comfort under thy wing. God bless thee, my brave little heart, and grant that our siege be not a long one before help comes to us. Such a happy feast." And for dessert more kisses and praises for Trudel when the mother came down to hear the story and to tell how eagerly father had drank the fresh milk and gone to sleep again. Trudel was very well pleased with her bargain. But at night she missed Jan's soft purr for her lullaby, and cried herself to sleep, grieving for her lost pet, being only a child, after all, though trying to be a brave little woman for the sake of those she loved. The big loaf and sausage took them nicely through the next day, but by Tuesday only crusts remained, and sorrel soup, slightly flavored with the last scrap of sausage, was all they had to eat. On Wednesday morning, Trudel had plaited her long yellow braids with care, smoothed down her one blue skirt, and put on her little black silk cap, making ready for the day's work. She was weak and hungry, but showed a bright face as she took her old basket and said, "Now I am off to market, grandmother, to sell the hose and get medicine and milk for father. I shall try to pick up something for dinner. The good neighbors often let me run errands for them, and give me a kuchen, a bit of cheese, or a taste of their nice coffee. I will bring you something, and come as soon as I can." The old woman nodded and smiled, as she scoured the empty kettle till it shone, and watched the little figure trudge away with the big empty basket, and, she knew, with a still emptier little stomach. "Coffee," sighed the grandmother. "One sip of the blessed drink would put life into me. When shall I ever taste it again?" And the poor soul sat down to her knitting with hands that trembled from weakness. The Platts was a busy and a noisy scene when Trudel arrived, for the thrifty Dutch women were early afoot. And stalls, carts, baskets, and cans were already arranged to make the most attractive display of fruit, vegetables, fish, cheese, butter, eggs, milk, and poultry, and the small wares country people came to buy. Nodding and smiling, Trudel made her way through the bustle to the booth where old Vrouw Schmidt bought and sold the blue woolen hose that adorned the stout legs of young and old. "Good morning, child. I am glad to see thee and thy well-knit stockings, for I have orders for 3 pairs, and promised thy grandmothers, they are always so excellent," said the rosy-faced woman, as Trudel approached. "I have but 1 pair. We had no money to buy more yarn. Father is so ill mother cannot work, and medicines cost a deal," said the child, with her large hungry eyes fixed on the breakfast the old woman was about to eat, first having made ready for the business of the day. "See, then, I shall give thee the yarn and wait for the hose, I can trust thee, and shall ask a good price for the good work. Thou too wilt have the fever, I'm afraid, so pale and thin, poor child. Here, drink from my cup, and take a bite of bread and cheese. The morning air makes one hungry." Trudel eagerly accepted the sup and the bite, and felt new strength flow into her as the warm draught and good brown bread went down her throat. "So many thanks. I had no breakfast. I came to see if I could get any errands here today, for I want to earn a bit if I can," she said with a sigh of satisfaction, as she slipped half of her generous slice and a good bit of cheese into her basket, regretting that the coffee could not be shared also. As if to answer her wish, a loud cry from fat Mother Kinkle, the fishwife, rose at that moment, for a thievish cur had run off with a fish from her stall, while she gossiped with a neighbor. Down went Trudel's basket, and away went Trudel's wooden shoes clattering over the stones while she raced after the dog, dodging in and out among the stalls till she cornered the thief under Gretchen Horn's milk cart. For at sight of the big dog who drew the 4 copper cans, the cur lost heart and dropped the fish and ran away. "Well done," said buxom Gretchen, when Trudel caught up the rescued treasure a good deal the worse for the dog's teeth and the dust it had been dragged through. All the market women laughed as the little girl came back proudly bearing the fish, for the race had amused them. But Mother Kinkle said with a sigh, when she saw the damage done her property, "It is spoiled. No one will buy that torn, dirty thing. Throw it on the muck pile, child, your trouble was in vain, though I thank you for it. Give it to me, please, if you don't want it. We can eat it, and would be glad of it at home," cried Trudel, hugging the slippery fish with joy, for she saw a dinner in it, and felt that her run was well paid. "Take it, then, and be off. I see Vrouw von Dekken's cook coming, and you are in the way," answered the old woman, who was not a very amiable person, as everyone knew. "That's a fine reward to make a child for running the breath out of her body for you," said Dame Troost, the handsome farm wife who sat close by among her fruit and vegetables, as fresh as her cabbages, and as rosy as her cherries. "Better it, then, and give her a feast fit for a burgomaster." "You can afford it," growled Mother Kinkle, turning her back on the other woman in a huff. "That I will, for very shame at such meanness. Here, child, take these for thy fish stew, and these for thy little self," said the kind soul, throwing half a dozen potatoes and onions into the basket, and handing Trudel a cabbage leaf full of cherries. A happy girl was our little housewife on her way home, when the milk and medicine and loaf of bread were bought, and a comfortable dinner was quickly cooked and gratefully eaten in Dort's poor house that day. Surely the saints must help you, child, and open people's hearts to our need, for you come back each day with food for us, like the ravens to the people in the wilderness, said the grandmother when they sat at table. If they do, it is because you pray to them so heartily, mother. But I think the sweet ways and thin face of my Trudel do much to win kindness, and the good God makes her our little house mother, while I must sit idle, answered Vrouw Dort. And she filled the child's platter again that she, at least, might have enough. I like it, cried Trudel, munching an onion with her bread, while her eyes shone and a pretty color came into her cheeks. I feel so old and brave now, so glad to help, and things happen, and I keep thinking what I will do next to get food. It's like the birds out yonder in the hedge, trying to feed their little ones. I fly up and down, pick and scratch, get a bit here and a bit there, and then my dear old birds have food to eat. It really was very much as Trudel said, for her small wits were getting very sharp with these new cares. She lay awake that night trying to plan how she should provide the next day's food for her family. Where now, thou dear little mother bird? Asked the grossmutter next morning, when the child had washed the last dish, and was setting away the remains of the loaf. To Gretty Jansen's, to see if she wants me to water her linen, as I used to do for play. She is lame, and it tires her to go to the spring so often. She will like me to help her, I hope, and I shall ask her for some food to pay me. Oh, I am very bold now. Soon will I beg if no other way offers. And Trudel shook her yellow head resolutely, and went to settle the stool at grandmother's feet, and to draw the curtain so that it would shield the old eyes from the summer sun. Heaven grant it never comes to that. It would be very hard to bear, yet perhaps we must if no help arrives. The doctor's bill, the rent, the good food thy father will soon need, will take far more than we can earn, and what will become of us, the saints only know. Answered the old woman, knitting briskly in spite of her sad forebodings. I will do it all. I don't know how, but I shall try, and, as you often say, have faith and hold up thy hands, God will fill them. Then Trudel went away to her work, with a stout heart under her little blue bodice. And all that summer day she trudged to and fro along the webs of linen spread in the green meadow, watering them as fast as they dried, knitting busily under a tree during the intervals. Old Gretty was glad to have her, and at noon called her in to share the milk soup, with cherries and herrings in it, and a pot of coffee as well as Dutch cheese, and bread full of coriander seed. Though this was a feast to Trudel, one bowl of soup and a bit of bread was all she ate. Then, with a face that was not half as bold as she tried to make it, she asked if she might run home and take the coffee to grandmother, who longed for and needed it so much. Yes, indeed. There, let me fill that pewter jug with a good hot mess for the old lady, and take this also. I have little to give, but I remember how good she was to me in the winter, when my poor legs were so bad, and no one else thought of me, said grateful Gretty, mixing more coffee. And tucking a bit of fresh butter into half a loaf of bread with a crusty end to cover the whole. Away ran Trudel, and when grandmother saw the blessed coffee, as she called it, she could only sip and sigh for comfort and content, so glad was the poor old soul to taste her favorite drink again. The mother smelled it, and came down to take her share, while Trudel skipped away to go on watering the linen till sunset with a happy heart, saying to herself while she trotted and splashed. This day is well over, and I have kept my word. Now what can I do tomorrow? Gretty doesn't want me, there is no market, I must not beg yet, and I cannot finish the hose so soon. I know. I'll get watercresses, and sell them from door to door. They are fresh now, and people like them. Ah, thou dear duck, thank thee for reminding me of them, she cried, as she watched a mother duck lead her brood along the brook's edge, picking and dabbling among the weeds to show them where to feed. Early next morning Trudel took her basket and went away to the meadows that lay just out of the town, where the rich folk had their summer houses, and fish ponds, and gardens. These gardens were gay now with tulips, the delight of Dutch people. For they know best how to cultivate them, and often make fortunes out of the splendid and costly flowers. When Trudel had looked long and carefully for cresses, and found very few, she sat down to rest, weary and disappointed, on a green bank from which she could overlook a fine garden all ablaze with tulips. She admired them heartily, longed to have a bed of them her own, and feasted her childish eyes on the brilliant colors till they were dazzled, for the long beds of purple and yellow, red and white blossoms were splendid to see. And in the midst of all a mound of dragon tulips rose like a queen's throne, scarlet, green, and gold all mingled on the ruffled leaves that waved in the wind. Suddenly it seemed as if one of the great flowers had blown over the wall and was hopping along the path in a very curious way. In a minute, however, she saw that it was a gay parrot that had escaped, and would have flown away if its clipped wings and a broken chain on one leg had not kept it down. Trudel laughed to see the bird scuttle along, jabbering to itself, and looking very mischievous and naughty as it ran away. She was just thinking she ought to stop it, when the garden gate opened, and a pretty little boy came out, calling anxiously. "Prince! Prince! Come back, you bad bird! I never will let you off your perch again, sly rascal! I will get him!" And Trudel ran down the bank after the runaway, for the lad was small and leaned upon a little crutch. "Be careful! He will bite," called the boy. "I'm not afraid," answered Trudel. And she stepped on the chain, which brought the Prince of Orange to a very undignified and sudden halt. But when she tried to catch him up by his legs, the sharp black beak gave a nip and held tightly to her arm. It hurt her much, but she did not let go, and carried her captive back to its master, who thanked her, and begged her to come in and chain up the bad bird, for he was evidently rather afraid of it. Glad to see more of the splendid garden, Trudel did what he asked, and with a good deal of fluttering, scolding, and pecking, the prince was again settled on his perch. "Your arm is bleeding. Let me tie it up for you. And here is my cake to pay you for helping me." "Mamma would have been very angry if Prince had been lost," said the boy, as he wet his little handkerchief in a tank of water nearby, and tied up Trudel's arm. The tank was surrounded by pots of tulips, and on a rustic seat lay the lad's hat and a delicious large kuchen, covered with comfits and sugar. The hungry girl accepted it gladly, but only nibbled at it, remembering those at home. The boy thought she did not like it, and being a generous little fellow and very grateful for her help, he looked about for something else to give her. Seeing her eyes fixed admiringly on a pretty red jar that held a dragon tulip just ready to bloom, he said pleasantly, "Would you like this also? All these are mine, and I can do as I like with them. Will you have it?" "Oh, yes, with thanks. It is so beautiful. I longed for one, but never thought to get it," cried Trudel, receiving the pot with delight. Then she hastened toward home to show her prize, only stopping to sell her little bunches of cresses for a few groschen, with which she bought a loaf and 3 herrings to eat with it. The cake and the flour gave quite the air of a feast to the poor meal, but Trudel and the 2 women enjoyed it all, for the doctor said that the father was better, and now needed only good meat and wine to grow strong and well again. How to get these costly things no one knew, but trusted they would come, and all fell to work with lighter hearts. The mother sat again at her lacework, for now a ray of light could be allowed to fall on her pillow and bobbins by the window of the sick room. The old woman's fingers flew as she knit at one long blue stocking. And Trudel's little hands tugged away at the other, while she cheered her dull task by looking fondly at her dear tulip unfolding in the sun. She began to knit next day as soon as the breakfast of dry bread and water was done. But she took her work to the doorstep and thought busily as the needles clicked, for where could she get money enough for meat and wine? The pretty pot stood beside her, and the tulip showed its gay leaves now, just ready to bloom. She was very proud of it, and smiled and nodded gaily when a neighbor said in passing, "A fine flower you have there." Soon she forgot it, however, so hard was her little brain at work, and for a long time she sat with her eyes fixed on her busy hands so intently that she neither heard steps approaching. nor saw a maid and a little girl looking over the low fence at her. Suddenly some words in a strange language made her look up. The child was pointing at the tulip and talking fast in English to the maid, who shook her head and tried to lead her on. She was a pretty little creature, all in white with a gay hat, curly locks, and a great doll in one arm, while the other held a box of bonbons. Trudel smiled when she saw the doll. And as if the friendly look decided her, the little girl ran up to the door, pointed to the flower, and asked a question in the queer tongue which Trudel could not understand. The maid followed, and said in Dutch, "Fräulein Maud wishes the flower. Will you give it to her, child?" "Oh, no, no. I love it. I will keep it, for now Jan is gone, it is all I have," answered Trudel, taking the pot in her lap to guard her one treasure. The child frowned, chattered eagerly, and offered the box of sweets, as if used to having her wishes gratified at once. But Trudel shook her head, for much as she loved sugar drops, she loved the splendid flower better, like a true little Dutchwoman. Then Miss Maud offered the doll, bent on having her own way. Trudel hesitated a moment, for the fine lady doll in pink silk, with a feather in her hat, and tiny shoes on her feet, was very tempting to her childish soul. But she felt that so dainty a thing was not for her, and her old wooden darling, with the staring eyes and broken nose, was dearer to her than the delicate stranger could ever be. So she smiled to suit the disappointed child, but shook her head again. At that, the English lassie lost her temper, stamped her foot, scolded, and began to cry, ordering the maid to take the flower and come away at once. She will have it. And she must not cry. "Here, child, will you sell it for this?" said the maid, pulling a handful of groschen out of her deep pocket, sure that Trudel would yield now. But the little house mother's quick eye saw that the whole handful would not buy the meat and wine, much as it looked, and for the third time she shook her yellow head. There was a longing look in her face, however. And the shrewd maid saw it, guessed that money would win the day, and diving again into her apron pocket, brought out a silver gulden and held it up. "For this, then, little miser. It is more than the silly flower is worth. But the young Fräulein must have all she wants, so take it and let us be done with the crying." A struggle went on in Trudel's mind, and for a moment she did not speak. She longed to keep her dear tulip, her one joy, and it seemed so hard to let it go before she had even seen it blossom once, but then the money would do much, and her loving little heart yearned to give poor father all he needed. Just then her mother's voice came down from the open window, softly singing an old hymn to lull the sick man to sleep. That settled the matter for the dutiful daughter. Tears rose to her eyes, and she found it very hard to say with a farewell caress of the blue and yellow pot as she gave it up. "You may have it, but it is worth more than a gulden, for it is a dragon tulip, the finest we have. Could you give a little more? My father is very sick, and we are very poor." The stout maid had a kind heart under her white muslin neckerchief. And while Miss Maud seized the flower, good Marta put another gulden into Trudel's hand before she hastened after her charge, who made off with her booty, as if fearing to lose it. Trudel watched the child with the half-opened tulip nodding over her shoulder, as though it sadly said "goodbye" to its former mistress, till her dim eyes could see no longer. Then she covered her face with her apron and sobbed very quietly, lest grandmother should hear and be troubled. But Trudel was a brave child, and soon the tears stopped, the blue eyes looked gladly at the money in her hand, and presently, when the fresh wind had cooled her cheeks, she went in to show her treasure and cheer up the anxious hearts with her good news. She made light of the loss of her flower, and still knitting, went briskly off to get the meat and wine for father, and if the money held out, some coffee for grandmother, some eggs and white rolls for mother, who was weak and worn with her long nursing. "Surely, the dear God does help me," thought the pious little maid, while she trudged back with her parcels, quite cheery again, though no pretty kitten ran to meet her, and no gay tulip stood full-blown in the noonday sun. Still more happy was she over her small sacrifices when she saw her father sip a little of the good broth grandmother made with such care, and saw the color come into the pale cheeks of the dear mother after she had taken the eggs and fine bread, with a cup of coffee to strengthen and refresh her. "We have enough for today, and for father tomorrow, but on Sunday we must fast as well as pray, unless the hose be done and paid for in time," said the old woman next morning, surveying their small store of food with an anxious eye. "I will work hard, and go to Frau Schmidt's the minute we are done. But now I must run and get wood, else the broth will not be ready," answered Trudel, clattering on her wooden shoes in a great hurry. "If all else fails, I too shall make my sacrifice as well as you, my heart's darling. I cannot knit as I once did, and if we are not done, or Frau Schmidt be away, I will sell my ring and so feed the flock till Monday," said the grandmother, lifting up one thin old hand, where shone the wedding ring she had worn so many years. "Ah, no, not that. It was so sad to see your gold beads go, and mother's earrings and father's coat and Jan and my lovely flower. We will not sell the dear old ring. I will find a way. Something will happen, as before. So wait a little, and trust to me," cried Trudel, with her arms about the grandmother, and such a resolute nod that the rusty little black cap fell over her nose and extinguished her. She laughed as she righted it, and went singing away, as if not a care lay heavy on her young heart. But when she came to the long dike which kept the waters of the lake from overflowing the fields below, she walked slowly to rest her tired legs, and to refresh her eyes with the blue sheet of water on one side and the still bluer flax fields on the other, for they were in full bloom, and the delicate flowers danced like fairies in the wind. It was a lonely place, but Trudel liked it, and went on toward the wood, turning the heel of her stocking while she walked, pausing now and then to look over at the sluice gates which stood here and there ready to let off the water when autumn rains made the lake rise, or in the spring when the flax fields were overflowed before the seed was sown. At the last of these she paused to gather a bunch of yellow stonecrop growing from a niche in the strong wall which, with earth and beams, made the dike. As she stooped, the sound of voices in the arch below came up to her distinctly. Few people came that way except little girls, like herself, to gather faggots in the wood, or truant lads to fish in the pond. Thinking the hidden speakers must be some of these boys, she knelt down behind the shrubs that grew along the banks, and listened with a smile on her lips to hear what mischief the naughty fellows were planning. But the smile soon changed to a look of terror, and she crouched low behind the bushes to catch all that was said in the echoing arch below. "How did I think of the thing? Why, that is the best part of the joke. Mein Herr von Vost put it into my head himself," said a man's gruff voice, in answer to some question. "This is the way it was. I sat at the window of the beer house, and von Vost met the burgomaster close by and said, 'My friend, I hear that the lower sluice gate needs looking to. Please see to it speedily, for an overflow now would ruin my flax fields, and cause many of my looms to stand still next winter. So it shall be looked to next week. Such a misfortune shall not befall you, my good neighbor,' said the burgomaster. And they parted. Ah, ha, thinks I to myself, here we have a fine way to revenge ourselves on Master von Vost, who turned us off and leaves us to starve. We have but to see that the old gate gives way between now and Monday, and that hard man will suffer in the only place where he can feel his pocket." Here the gruff voice broke into a low laugh, and another man said slowly, "A good plan. But is there no danger of being found out, Pete Stenson?" "Not a chance of it. See here, Dietrich, a quiet blow or two, at night when none can hear it, will break away these rotten boards and let the water in. The rest it will do itself. And by morning those great fields will be many feet under water, and von Vost's crop ruined. Yes, we will stop his looms for him, and other men besides you and I and Nicholas Haas will stand idle with starving children round them. Come, will you lend a hand? Nicholas is away looking for work, and Hans Dort is sick, or they might be glad to help us." "Hans would never do it. He is sober, and so good a weaver he will never want work when he is well. I will be with you, Pete. But swear not to tell it, whatever happens, for you and I have bad names now, and it would go hard with us. I'll swear anything, but have no fear. We will not only be revenged on the master, but get the job of repairing. Since men are scarce and the need will be great when the flood is discovered. See, then, how fine a plan it is. And meet me here at 12 tonight with a shovel and pick. Mine are already hidden in the wood yonder. Now, come and see where we must strike, and then slip home the other way, we must not be seen here by any one. There the voices stopped, and steps were heard going deeper into the arch. Trudel, pale with fear, rose to her feet, slipped off her sabots, and ran away along the dike like a startled rabbit, never pausing till she was safely round the corner and out of sight. Then she took breath, and tried to think what to do first. It was of no use to go home and tell the story there. Father was too ill to hear it or to help, and if she told the neighbors, the secret would soon be known everywhere and might bring danger on them all. No, she must go at once to Maine Hervon Vost and tell him alone, begging him to let no one know what she had heard, but to prevent the mischief the men threatened, as if by accident. Then all would be safe, and the pretty flax fields kept from drowning. It was a long way to the master's, as he was called, because he owned the linen factories, where all day many looms jangled, and many men and women worked busily to fill his warehouses and ships with piles of the fine white cloth. Famous all the world over. But forgetting the wood, father's broth, granny's coffee, and even the knitting which she still held, Trudel went as fast as she could toward the country house, where Maine Hervon Vost would probably be at his breakfast. She was faint now with hunger and heat, for the day grew hot, and the anxiety she felt made her heart flutter while she hurried along the dusty road till she came to the pretty house in its gay garden, where some children were playing. Anxious not to be seen, Trudel slipped up the steps, and in at the open window of a room where she saw the master and his wife sitting at table. Both looked surprised to see a shabby, breathless little girl enter in that curious fashion. But something in her face told them that she came on an important errand, and putting down his cup, the gentleman said quickly, "Well, girl, what is it?" In a few words Trudel told her story, adding with a beseeching gesture, "Dear sir, please do not tell that I betrayed Bad Pete and Dietrich. They know father, and may do him some harm if they discover that I told you this. We are so poor, so unhappy now, we cannot bear any more," and quite overcome with the troubles that filled her little heart, and the fatigue and the hunger that weakened her little body, Trudel dropped down at Von Vost's feet as if she were dead. When she came to herself, she was lying on a velvet sofa and the sweet-faced lady was holding wine to her lips, while Maine Hervon Vost marched up and down the room with his flowered dressing gown waving behind him, and a frown on his brow. Trudel sat up and said she was quite well, but the little white face and the hungry eyes that wandered to the breakfast table, told the truth, and the good Frau had a plate of food and a cup of warm milk before her in a moment. "Eat, my poor child, and rest a little, while the master considers what is best to be done, and how to reward the brave little messenger who came so far to save his property," said the motherly lady, fanning Trudel, who ate heartily. Hardly knowing what she ate, except that it was very delicious after so much bread and water. In a few moments Hervon Vost paused before the sofa and said kindly, though his eyes were stern and his face looked hard, "See, then, thus shall I arrange the affair, and all will be well. I will myself go to see the old gate, as if made anxious lest the burgomaster should forget his promise. I find it in a dangerous state, and at once set my men at work. The rascals are disappointed of both revenge and wages, and I can soon take care of them in other ways, for they are drunken fellows, and are easily clapped into prison and kept safely there till ready to work and to stop plotting mischief. No one shall know your part in it, my girl, but I do not forget it. Tell your father his loom waits for him. Meanwhile, here is something to help while he must be idle." Trudel's plate nearly fell out of her hands as a great gold piece dropped into her lap, and she could only stammer her thanks with tears of joy, and a mouth full of bread and butter. "He is a kind man, but a busy one, and people call him hard. You will not find him so hereafter, for he never forgets a favor, nor do I eat well, dear child, and wait till you are rested. I will get a basket of comforts for the sick man. Who else needs help at home? So kindly did Frau von Vost look and speak that Trudel told all her sad tale freely, for the master had gone at once to see to the dike, after a nod and a pat on the child's head, which made her quite sure that he was not as hard as people said. When she had opened her heart to the friendly lady, Trudel was left to rest a few moments, and lay luxuriously on the yellow sofa staring at the handsome things about her, and eating pretzels till Frau von Vost returned with the promised basket, out of which peeped the neck of a wine bottle, the legs of a chicken, glimpses of grapes, and many neat parcels of good things. My servant goes to market and will carry this for you till you are near home. Go, little Trudel, and God bless you for saving us from a great misfortune, said the lady. And she kissed the happy child and led her to the back door, where stood the little cart with an old man to drive the fat horse, and many baskets to be filled in town. Such a lovely drive our Trudel had that day. No queen in a splendid chariot ever felt prouder, for all her cares were gone, gold was in her pocket, food at her feet, and friends secured to make times easier for all. No need to tell how joyfully she was welcomed at home, nor what praises she received when her secret was confided to mother and grandmother, nor what a feast was spread in the poor house that day, for patience, courage, and trust in God had won the battle, the enemy had fled, and Trudel's hard siege was over.